We started a series, Won't You Be My Neighbor? So this is not a test for you to see if you were listening. This is a test for me to see if I'm a good teacher or not. And we defined a neighbor as this. A neighbor is 5 of you. Awesome. I'll take that 5 on the curve. You all are passing the class. Jesus says, hey, first commandment, love the Lord with all your and mind. It says all your passion, your strength, and all your prayers. That's what I love. One of the versions in the Message version, it says, it's like all my passion and my strength and my prayers. That's how I should love God. And the second commandment, just as great, is to love my neighbor as myself. Who's my neighbor, though? Everyone. And Jesus, when we started this a couple weeks ago, we talked about that our neighbor is everyone. That Jesus isn't talking about the person sitting next to you right now. Yes, that's your neighbor, perhaps. But really, our neighbor is whoever it is that God has in front of you right now. And so as we walk through life and we walk through our day, that quite possibly the relationships that you're in right now, the people that you're in relationship with are your neighbors. That it has nothing to do with geography, that it has more to do with who it is that you have sitting right in front of you. For some of you, your family is your neighbor. Your coworkers are your neighbors. Your boss, who you maybe like or dislike, or maybe you are the boss, but your employees are your neighbors. The people on the 78 freeway that you want to tell that they're number one. Which I would never do. I'm a pastor. I'm just like, God, thank you. I'm thanking God for you right now. For driving like your head is somewhere else. I have low blood sugar. Yeah, we're going to have fun. So ask this question, who's your one? Who's the one person that's in front of you? Who is the one person that God today has put you in front of? And we asked that question a couple weeks ago. This week we're going to continue, and since I know that my neighbor can be anybody, and I know that really God just wants me to love the person that's in front of me, that I need to know their need then. And today we're going to talk about knowing the need of the person in front of me, but meeting this real need, that the people around us have real needs that require real solutions. But we're going to talk about this thing that happens where instead of us responding out of real love, and this word real just means tangible. Just to make this simple, the word real just means tangible. So instead of me addressing the needs of the people around me with tangible response, lending a hand and being tangible, sometimes instead of real love, we offer what I call religious love. And religious love looks like, I'll pray for you. Although we should pray for them. But too often what they need is immediate hand. And we're going to look at a couple stories, Jesus in the New Testament and how he handles some of this. And we're going to laugh a little bit, and we're going to feel some conviction a little bit. But my goal today is that we're going to meet Jesus face to face somewhere in the midst of this. Amen? Amen. We're going to start in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, there's this story. We're going to start in verse 43, and if some of you maybe are turning there, this right before this in Jesus' life, he's actually spending some time, and he goes to a well where he's drawing some water. He's going to get something to drink, and he meets this woman there, and this woman is a Samaritan. Now, in context, culturally, in society, this woman being a Samaritan means that Jesus should not have been talking to her. Number one, culturally, men didn't really interact with women a whole ton this way, but specifically, she was a Samaritan woman. Jesus being a Jew, her being a Samaritan, that was a no-no. So he starts talking to this woman, the Samaritan woman. Jesus, in this conversation, ends up telling this woman a few things that's going on in her life that no one would really know. And perhaps if they did know, for sure Jesus was not one of those people because he had never met this woman before. He starts telling her some things that are going on, and she is stunned. basically reveals to her that she has some real needs in her life, and that he and he alone is the only real solution. And today I would start by saying to you that I understand that we have real immediate needs in our life that look very practical, but at the heart of who we are in our humanity, I am here to tell you that we, in all of our real needs, have one real solution, and his name is Jesus. Our job is to make plain this tangible, real love of Jesus in people's lives. And so we fast forward in this chapter into verse 43, and Jesus says after 2 days he left for Galilee. Now Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, for they also had been there. Now I want to stop and just say, again, a small teaching moment, that what they had seen done at the Passover feast was Jesus' mom, Mary, came to Jesus and said, Jesus. And when mom comes to you and says, hey, my mom doesn't call me Pat when she needs something. When I grew up, I'm a little Irish boy. It was Patty. So I ever had like 50 people go like, hey, Patty. And I'm like, ha, haven't heard that before. So when my mom's like, Patty, because that's kind of how she sounds. You see my mom cruising around, don't listen to a word she says about me. She tells stories that are wild and untrue. So when my mom is like, Patty, we got a problem. Like Jesus, it's like he's just going to do what mom. So mom comes to him and says, hey, Jesus, we're at a party. We're at a really sweet party. And we're out of wine. And my Jesus likes to party. So what does she say? We need wine. So Jesus says, okay. He takes the water and he turns it into, but he doesn't just turn it into any wine, he turns it into the best of wine. Let's not get hung up on the fact of wine, grape juice, okay? This is what we need to focus on. When Jesus sees a real need, he doesn't offer an okay or mediocre solution. He always brings his best. So these people that we're going to read about real quick here watched Jesus perform his first miracle of his entire life in turning water into the best. Because that's what Jesus does. He takes real needs and he brings the best real solutions. Now I have to tell you, sometimes the best real solutions for my needs are not the solutions that I think are best. But they're the best solution. And so these are the people that are around Jesus. As once more he visited Cana in Galilee. This is the story that I just summarized, probably horribly, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick in Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and he begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see miraculous signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. The royal official said, Sir, come down before my child dies. What was the real need that this royal official had? His son was dying. This was really simple. It wasn't a trick question. His son was dying. Jesus replied, which I love. Jesus replied, you can go. He'll live. How many times do I come to Jesus with a real need? And the solution he has, that I trust that his solution is always going to be the best, but when I walk away somewhat like, kind of like, with that question mark in my head, scratching my head, because it's like, Jesus, I got this need, and he's like, you can go. I'm like, wait, but you don't understand. Jesus, you don't, like, I think I need to explain a little bit more to you perhaps, because I don't think you fully understand what I'm asking you. Because this death is going to happen, and Jesus is like, no, I don't think you understand. I told you. The problem is that when you have a real need, do you take Jesus at his word? That the solution he has is the best solution and that it's a real solution? Do you take it and do you believe him at his word? Because what Jesus is saying, he's like, yeah, you can go, your son will live. And this man, It actually says, the man took Jesus at his word and he departed. While he was still, by the way, what's about to happen had nothing to do with how much this guy could have stood there and worried or argued with Jesus. Didn't need to explain it away. He needed to walk away and he needed to believe Jesus at his word. It says, so the man took Jesus at his word and he departed. While he was still on his way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, the fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and all his household believed. This was the second miraculous sign that Jesus performed, having come from Judea to Galilee. Now, I just want to say, Jesus simply met a real need with a real solution. He simply met a real need that was quite practical. My son's going to die, with a real solution. I healed him. Oftentimes, when we perceive a real need, love the neighbor as myself, and I see the need, am I responding with a real solution? Am I responding practically? People are looking for practical solutions to practical needs. And too often what happens, what Jesus didn't say to this man. Jesus did not say to him, oh, your son's dying? Okay, let's get a couple things in order first. Do you know who I am? Do you know, can you tell me in all of the books that we call the Old Testament now, by the way, we're the only testament when Jesus walked. There was no New Testament. The New Testament was being written in the hearts and in the spirit as Jesus was walking. So the only scripture they had was the old, what we call the Old Testament. Jesus didn't stop the man and say, do you know everything in the first part of this book? Do you understand that everything in the first, do you understand that everything that's been written so far was actually there as a revelation to reveal who I am? So do you know who I am? Because see, I can't meet your practical need with a practical solution until you and I are on the same page. Jesus didn't do that. In fact, what Jesus did is he bypassed that and he just said, I'm going to meet your real need with a real solution. I'm going to bring real love and not religious love. Religious love says, I'm going to put parameters around this that you and I got to make sure that you're adhering to every rule and there's everything. By the way, you and I are never going to be able to adhere to every rule. Jesus knows this man, he would never be able to adhere to every rule. And what Jesus does is he deals with the need with real love, not religious love, not boxes to check. In fact, it says at the very end of this, proof of this is after he heals this guy, it says, so he and his whole household believed. That sometimes our theories about who God is might prescribe language or an understanding that says, if I'm not in perfect order with God, let me back up. Your neighbor doesn't know Jesus does not mean you cannot meet your neighbor's needs with real solutions. In fact, I'm here to tell you that you may be the only face-to-face encounter that someone has with Jesus when you lend your hand and your heart. That too often we want to respond with this kind of religious kind of love. And Jesus is saying, I just want you to respond with tangible love. There's a need, we meet it. By the way, so he and his household believed. In Matthew 12:1, similar. It says, at the time, Jesus went through the grain fields. On the Sabbath, his disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. Now, his disciples who were following him were hungry, and so when you get hungry, what do? If you're thirsty, what do you do? If you need clothes, what do? You put some clothes on. Or you go buy some. Because why? Because you actually will love yourself. And we should love our neighbor as ourselves. So can I also say to you this morning that probably the first place that the enemy wants to stop you from loving is loving yourself? That if the enemy can stop me from loving myself, then it will probably ensure that I'm not going to love the people around me, because I will probably only love the people around me to a fraction of the degree that I love myself. So if I love myself to like a 5 out of 10, I'm going to love people like 2 or 3 maybe. But I'm never going to give more. I'm never going to love people more. We can try, but the truth is, we will always have a disconnect. So what's happening here in this story? Jesus is walking with his disciples, and they're hungry. And he goes, and they pick some heads of grain to eat. It says, when the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. The Pharisees are nothing more than religious rulers of the time, and their job is to keep religious rule. Their job is to keep the law. And they're looking too many times, society, people around you, the enemy wants to look at you and put religious boxes around you and how you're going to love. And if he can stop you from loving yourself well, he's going to stop you from loving other people. And the Pharisees right now, what they're doing is they're trying to put a box around the disciples. And saying, we can't let this infect society. We can't let this Jesus infect society. We can't let his disciples infect society. So if we can stop them right at the gate, if we can trip them up at the gate and say they're being unlawful, they're doing something on the Sabbath. By the way, the Sabbath is the day of what? Rest. And these Pharisees have put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of extra rules on what can be done on the Sabbath and can't be done on the Sabbath. There's like scripturally what God said, and then there's all the things that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, these two groups, put on it. And they're coming and they're saying, they're beginning this process of saying, you have to love religiously. You can't love tangibly. In fact, we're going to start with you. You can't even love yourself tangibly. If you're hungry, it's the Sabbath. You're supposed to rest. So you're doing work by expending energy getting food for yourself. Does this sound kind of absurd? But to them, it didn't sound absurd. This is what religion does. Religion, the religion, this kind of man-made religion, always lulls you into a place of taking something that's absurd and making it somewhat normal, and this is okay. Jesus answered, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? David was this guy in the Old Testament. I just want to make sure, because some people maybe not know who David is. David was this guy in the Old Testament. He was a king. He was a warrior. He was a shepherd. He was a musician. He was a songwriter. He was all these things. He was this amazing guy. I love David. I love David because he was always getting into trouble. And I feel out. I'm always in trouble. And I love it. But what David was is he was after the heart of God more than any other person. And so what it tells me is that, yes, you and I are going to make mistakes. We will fail the religious law. We will fail the religious love. We will never add up. But we are always able to receive the real love of God, because David was after the heart of God. He wanted to be where God was. He wanted to understand who God was. And he knew that God was his provision. If you read through a lot of the scriptures that David wrote in the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible, you're going to see David praying prayers that basically are admissions. God, I know you do these things. You love me tangibly. You help me escape from my enemies. You feed me when I'm hungry. These are very practical things. These are practical needs that God would bring real solutions to. So David, now as a leader, would think in his mind, hey, I know this is who God is. And so I'm going to take and I'm going to treat my companions, the people that I'm leading, the people that are around me the same way. And I'm going to meet their needs, and they're hungry. And Jesus is telling him the story. And this guy knows the story because this Pharisee is a master of everything written in the first part of this book, okay? I want us to understand this. So Jesus doesn't have to fill in the blanks with this guy. He can make these statements and bring these things up, and this guy has all of it memorized, and he knows exactly what Jesus is talking about. And he says to him, hey, I want you to remember, haven't you read that David did what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for priests. It would be like you being outside, and you're hungry, and the people around you are wildly hungry, and the only doors open in the entire city of San Marcos is the doors to this building. And you come in the building, and you go to every table that we have our communion set up on throughout the building, and you take all the crackers and all of the juice, and you drink all the juice and you eat all the crackers because you're hungry. And you need to eat. You have a real need, and that's your real solution. And in the Old Testament time, in the times that the Pharisees understood, the way that they wanted to love people, that was against the law. You and I wouldn't even be allowed in this building based on what the Old Testament says. And Jesus is beginning to paint this story because they're trying to box Jesus in. They're trying to tell Jesus, you need to love religiously. You're not allowed to love tangibly and real. And think for 1 second if they would have derailed Jesus in his life. It completely would have changed the trajectory of where he was going. And instead of the cross, he would have taken you and I to a courtroom. And we would have been judged. And maybe rightfully so. But that wasn't what Jesus was here to do. He was here to love with a real, tangible love. He says, or haven't you read in the law that the priests on the Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. Who's he talking about? Himself. He's like the temple. The very thing that in the history of all of our people got tore down and had to get rebuilt multiple times. I am actually the new temple. And what man will do in tearing me down, the religion, the religiosity that man builds, not the religion that God gives to say that I'm a true believer in who God is, but all of the things, the extracurricular, the peripheral things, are going to tear me down as the new temple, and I will be rebuilt in 3 days. In fact, he says to them, if you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. The word mercy is compassion, that I desire compassion. Compassion is love in action. Jesus is saying to them, I desire love in action. That means when I see a need, I deal with the need. When I see it, I address it. When I see something that's needed and it's pressing on someone's life, I deal with it. I don't just act like, you know, hey, I'm Jesus. My prayer, this really means something. I'll pray for you. A prayer from Jesus is like, praying for you. So they're trying to get Jesus into this religious mindset. Going on from that place, verse 9, he went to their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Okay, this man has a shriveled hand. Okay, if you walked in and you saw a guy, and he had one of his hands was shriveled, would you perceive that man to have a need? Okay, there you go. Sometimes finding the need isn't that difficult. He walks in, the man has a shriveled hand. You're like, oh, shriveled hand. Most of us, though, go, oh, shriveled hand. I can't do anything about that. Jesus sees the man with the shriveled hand. The rest of the people see the man with the shriveled hand. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? What are they trying to do? They're trying to get Jesus to misbehave. They're trying to get hold on a second. Don't we sometimes try to get Jesus to misbehave? We're like, Jesus, if I can get you to misbehave, then what I can do is I can completely, that'll validate that all the things that I don't have to worry about, I don't have to listen to you. I just need to get you to misbehave. That's what we're trying to do. Jesus, we don't have to believe who you say you are if we can get you to misbehave. So we're going to test you. We want to get you to misbehave. And this is how, like for me, I go, God, it's Monday morning. When I get up in the morning, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've done this before. God, I'm going to get up in the morning, so I'm going to test you. If every light between here and work is green and I don't have to stop, I'll know you're real. Have any of you ever said one of these funny prayers? It's cool. Like, that's totally, Jesus is like, I think he knows. He's like, that's cute. Like, green lights. God, like, what are you talking about, silly? Like, I ain't worried about green lights. And we're like, well, no, we're going to test you. Because if we can get Jesus, because in my heart, see, I'm asking on the surface, but in my heart, I'm like, if I can get you to misbehave, Jesus, then I can actually dismiss you. And that's where these guys are at. They're like, if we can get you to misbehave, we can dismiss you. He said to them, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, is it unlawful to do good on the Sabbath? This is what he's saying. If you approach a human being and you see another human in need, if it was one of your sheep, wouldn't you deal with the need of the sheep that was right in front of you? And if you would for the sheep, why wouldn't you for a human being? What he's saying is, why is it that we have more stickers on the back of our car to save trees, whales, and every other kind of gnat, bird, and moss that grows across the earth, but we don't have stickers on our cars, and we don't chain ourselves to clinics or chain ourselves to different things and say, we need to place humanity higher than creation. By the way, I want to tell you that creation, this will tweak your brain. If we want to see the perfection of creation happen, it comes through Jesus. That your life is worth, I don't need someone online, someone is going to like light me on fire for this. You're worth more than a tree. I get the arguments. I get the stickers. I get that everyone's kid is like student of the month. So are like 32,000 other kids that go to that elementary school. But hey, side note, there's one winner. Everyone else is a loser. My kid's like, I want to play chess with you, Dad. She's 8 years old. I'm like, yeah, we can play chess. And then I just crush her every time. Because I'm a good father. And I want her to know there's a winner and there's a loser. Second place is the first place loser, baby. I don't want you to walk through life thinking that you need to be entitled and handed anything. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. It's just horrible parenting advice. But I got 6, so I can afford to mess up a few of them. We're gonna get it right on number 7 here. Number 7's gonna get like all the love, and like other 6 are gonna be just irritated at us. You let her win at chess. What's Jesus saying? He's saying, you got to deal with the need that's in front of you. I love this. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. Why are they going to kill Jesus? Because he misbehaved? Do you know that religious love is always here to try to modify your behavior, and Jesus is here with real love to try to mend your brokenness? Real love will always mend brokenness, where religious love always modifies behavior. And we are not in the business of behavior modification. So look, if you come to me and you're like, I got a drug issue, I got a drinking, okay, those are some issues. You got to deal with those issues. There's some real things you maybe need to deal with. But I am here to tell you there's probably some heart issues inside of you on why you keep going back to a substance. And Jesus is here to mend the broken heart, because if I can deal with the root and the soil, it will produce good fruit. Are you with me? Man, I want the best apples I could possibly get off this apple tree. Well, your tree is planted in horrible soil. My apples are sick. Okay, don't inject your apples. You need to deal with the roots and the soil. We have the same instruction, James 2:14. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed. Here it is. Go in peace. I'll be praying for you, brother. I'm gonna set aside 15 minutes of my time today when I'm in my prayer closet, and I'm gonna pray for you. I've scheduled it in. Now here, I want you to understand something. You need to pray. Okay, listen. You have a single mom. She's living across the street from you. Her derelict husband leaves her. She's got 3 babies at home. She's trying to do everything she can to take care of that house. She's working 3 jobs, and her lawn is overgrown. And you figure out that loving the one in front of you is the single mom across the street. And you're like, what's the one real immediate need? You know what? Someone could mow her lawn. And you're like, Jenny, I'll call her Jenny. No offense to someone here to Jenny. Jenny, I see here that you're a single mom and you're really struggling. Your derelict husband left you. Probably don't say that. It probably won't go over well. Your derelict husband left you, and I see that your grass is overgrown. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to meet a real need with a real solution. I'm going to pray for you for 15 minutes today about your grass. I got, Jenny, I got you. Jenny, I got your back. That woman's going to look at you and go, I can't even hear about your Jesus past my immediate need. If you want to pray for her, I'll tell you this is how you should pray for her. You go in your garage and you get your lawnmower and you push it across the street. You start it. And you start mowing her lawn. You meet a real need with a real solution. And as you're mowing the lawn, you have at least 15 minutes that you can pray. But too often, we say we have faith in a God that we don't exercise and show to people. And that's religious love. Because if you see a sheep that's in a pit, how much more should we respond to them as a human being? What are the real needs of the people around you? What are the things that God is putting you in front of somebody that you say today is like, this is my neighbor, this is who's in front of me. And you're perceiving what that immediate need is. What is it today? How can we meet those needs? You know, if you're like, my life's perfect, I don't even have anybody, I don't even need anybody. Like, everyone around me doesn't even have a need. That's cool. We got a school down the street called San Marcos Elementary. Lots of needs. Like, why do we show up at this school? Why do we help? Why do we buy these kids uniforms every year? Why do we show up to clean up school? Why do have volunteers go into the classroom? Why do we do this? Because these kids are in a position that they didn't choose to be in, and they have real needs that don't need me to pray for them solely. They need me to show up and actually put my hands to work. They need me to show up and actually do something for them. That's what they need. A wonderful woman I was meeting with this week, her and her husband, they go to our church. They had a ministry in South Africa for almost 8 years. Beautiful ministry where they fed kids. 300 kids a day would come to their little ministry, and they would feed these kids. And oftentimes they'd feel like, I don't have enough. We're going to talk about that next week, by the way. Some of you are going to get overwhelmed when you realize the need of your neighbor, and you're going to go, well, I can't solve that. We're going to talk next week about how God has equipped you to actually bring a real solution to a need, even if you feel overwhelmed, like you can't answer it because it's too big of a need. This couple, they took on all of Africa. And they did it by feeding these 300. And she looked at me and she said something very interesting. She said, Pat, I realized I'm praying for these kids. We're seeing God do miraculous things. But I realized one thing. When these little guys and girls would show up and their mamas would come with them, we wanted them so desperately to know Jesus. But I realized they couldn't hear the voice of Jesus past a hungry belly. This woman has done more in ministry in that way than I've ever done in my life. Making a huge impact. And I heard that, and I was like, that is so simple. Feed the need. The realest, most tangible response from Jesus that someone may ever get is your hand, is your heart, it's your time. And too often, we walk around and we want to ask people to modify their behavior before we love them. Oftentimes, in my own life, I feel like I need to stop trying to convert someone's behavior. And I need to become committed to covering someone's brokenness. What is broken about your neighbor's life that you can become committed to today to cover? And that's a real solution. And in the midst of doing that, they're going to come face to face with Jesus. Let's stand this morning. I realized this morning as I say this, that some of you in this room have real needs. I realize that some of you are actually dealing with immediate practical things that you're having trouble with. And I want to be sure to not leave here without addressing those things, without praying for those things. So we have a ministry team who would love to pray for you. But also, to go a step further, I would actually ask, if you have a real need here this morning, that there's a card in the chair right in front of you called a response card. You can take that card out, write it down. This is my need. This is what I'm struggling with. And what I also know is that even as I'm in need, I'm still called to serve the needs of others. That while I'm struggling in my current situation, God hasn't said to me, you need to stop loving other people. Because that would be religious love. Pat, you need to have it all together before you actually stand up and ask anyone else to come along for the journey. You know, this would be the last Sunday that you see me because I don't have it all together. If you watched me from Sunday to Sunday, it would be a storyline of you walking alongside of me and watching me fall on my face as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a boss, as a pastor, as a person trying to get gas at a really big box store in Escondido with long lines. I'd lose my mind. God's not asking me, and He's not asking you to fit into these boxes before we start caring. But He also isn't saying, you need to forget about your needs. And so it's an and both. So we want to know what your needs are. Some of them tangibly we might be able to step in. We might be able to help with. And some of them might be things that we go, God, you know, I don't have the cure for cancer, but I have Jesus. So we will pray. And do you know what? We see God move in those ways. We watch people get healed. And we are going to be relentless about pursuing and chasing after Jesus, the same way He was relentless in pursuing and chasing after us. So this morning, as we move forward, we're going to know that our neighbor is anybody, but specifically the person that God's put in front of you. And today we need to identify what is the one immediate need. Next week, we're going to talk about what to do with that once you identify that. If you have a need this morning, we want to pray for you. Let's bow our heads. If you feel comfortable doing so, you can just open your hands up. God, I just pray right now this morning for a release. Even as we started the service, when I said, God, we invite you here. God, we invite you into the house. We invite you into every room of the house. We invite you into every aspect of our lives. We also invite you to infiltrate, to literally infest, to be viral. We invite you, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of every single person that we come in contact with. That the areas that our neighbors want to keep closed off, that God, you would just give us this really specific insight to be able to love them very tangibly. We are not their Savior. We're not their solution. But we can be the hand and the face of Jesus. God, that we would have the courage as followers of who you are to not rely on the movement, but that we would understand that each one of you, that you would understand today that each one of you are a movement. That what you carry and what you bring to your neighbors is unique and it's powerful. And I can't duplicate what you carry and what you can bring. But you can bring it. And you can actually be something real for someone who is broken, that we would cover the brokenness. God, we thank you this morning. In Jesus' powerful name, everyone said, amen.